The plumber's face had turned the color of ash, his eyes darting around the room as if every shadow hid something dangerous. And he said with a voice tight with urgency, "Ma'am, take only what's essential and leave this house right now. Don't say a word to your son or daughter. Your life is in danger." And for a moment I couldn't move, standing frozen in the kitchen, staring at him as his trembling hands stuffed wrenches and pipes back into his toolbox. The sound of metal clinking against metal echoing in my ears, sharp and final. I wanted to laugh and tell him he must have been mistaken, but something in his expression stopped me cold. That was when it hit me. The problem in my bathroom wasn't just a simple leak. It was something much darker. Something that didn't belong in the home I had called my sanctuary for decades. That morning had begun like any other Tuesday. The Texas sun pouring softly through the blinds, warming the tiled floor. The rhythmic dripping from the upstairs faucet had kept me awake for most of the night, and by the time dawn broke, I felt an ache pounding behind my eyes. When I walked into the dining room, I noticed a dark stain spreading on the ceiling right below the bathroom. A slow leak, I thought. Nothing serious. Something a plumber could fix in an hour. I reached for my phone and dialed the number my son Michael had given me months ago. "They're reliable, Mom," he'd said with that quick, charming smile of his. On the other end of the line, a calm voice assured me someone would be there within an hour. At 68, I lived alone in the house my husband and I had bought nearly 40 years earlier in the quiet suburbs of Dallas. After his death 5 years ago, the house had started to feel unbearably large, too empty. That emptiness didn't last long, though. My children came back one by one. Michael moved in first, claiming he needed to save for his own place. Julia followed soon after, broken from a painful divorce, dragging her suitcases and her silence through the door. When the doorbell rang that morning, I opened it to find a man in his early 50s standing on my porch. He was of average height, with graying hair and kind eyes that somehow looked weary. His faded blue jumpsuit bore faint smudges of oil and dust. He carried a heavy red toolbox that clanked when he set it down. "Mrs. Jean," he asked politely. "I'm Anthony the plumber." I let him inside, pointed out the damp patch on the ceiling, and took him upstairs. He moved with quiet focus, checking the fixtures, the faucet, the tile edges. "I'll need to see the pipes in the basement," he said finally. "If there's a hidden leak, it could be affecting the entire system." I nodded and showed him the narrow door to the basement. The hinges squeaked as it opened, and a cool draft brushed my arm. He descended the creaky steps with his flashlight, and I returned to the kitchen to make myself a light lunch. The house was unusually still. Julia was still asleep. She rarely rose before noon these days, and Michael had already left for his construction job. I filled the kettle and tried to shake off a strange uneasiness I couldn't quite explain. The faint sound of clanging from below echoed through the floorboards as Anthony worked. About an hour later, I heard the basement door creak open. "Anthony," I called out. He stepped into the kitchen, but the expression on his face made my stomach tighten. His skin had gone pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he removed his gloves. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "could we sit down for a moment?" I motioned toward the kitchen table, my pulse quickening. He sat across from me, removed his glasses, and wiped them on his sleeve. His voice was quiet but steady. "Mrs. Jean, what I found in your basement isn't a plumbing issue," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "Something has been deliberately installed down there. It's not normal." A chill crept down my spine. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, searching for words. "It's a system connected directly to your home's ventilation, specifically the duct leading to your bedroom." I blinked in confusion. "It must be from the renovation 2 years ago," I said quickly. "Michael hired a crew to redo the bathroom and update the air system." Anthony leaned forward, lowering his voice to almost a whisper. "Have you been feeling unusually tired lately? Headaches, dizziness, maybe trouble concentrating?" His words startled me. "Well, yes. I admitted I've been more tired than usual, and the headaches are constant. But I'm 68. That's just part of getting older. And your children, he asked carefully, do they have the same symptoms? I frowned. No, they're perfectly fine. Anthony took a slow breath. Ma'am, I think you should come see something for yourself. The air in the basement felt heavy, damp, and cold. The single light bulb above us flickered as we stepped down the old wooden stairs. The smell of dust and rust filled my nose. Anthony's flashlight cut through the dimness as he led me behind the boiler, a spot I hadn't touched in years. Here, he said quietly. At first I saw nothing unusual. Just pipes, wires, and old boxers stacked on the concrete floor. But then the flashlight beam caught a metallic gleam, a small silver box about the size of a toaster with thin, clear tubes running from it into the wall. What is that? I asked, stepping closer. It's a device designed to release substances into the air. Anthony explained. See these tubes? They feed directly into your bedroom's ventilation system. He pointed to several small canisters attached to the device, each filled with a liquid of a different color. A row of tiny digital timers blinked in sequence. This setup is programmed to release small doses over time, usually while you sleep. I felt the blood drain from my face. Substances. What kind of substances? He hesitated. From what I can tell, these are toxic compounds, chemicals that cause fatigue, headaches, and eventually organ failure. They mimic natural illness so that the symptoms appear gradual over time. It would be fatal. I reached out and touched one of the tubes. It felt faintly warm. It's running right now. Anthony nodded grimly. Yes, ma'am. Whoever set this up knew exactly what they were doing. My breath caught. You're saying someone installed this to poison me? I'm afraid so, he said softly, and whoever did it had full access to your home. This wasn't done by a stranger. It felt as though the ground beneath me shifted. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. My children, I whispered. Anthony's jaw tightened. This system required specific technical knowledge and time to install, you said. Your son works in construction. I stared at the device, my mind spinning. 2 years ago, Michael had insisted on renovating the bathroom himself. Julia had moved in soon after, claiming she wanted to take care of me. That was around the time the fatigue began. The timing wasn't a coincidence. How long has this been operating? I asked faintly. He crouched and examined the canisters. Judging by the corrosion on these parts, at least 8 months. 8 months, that was when I'd started feeling dizzy after dinner, when sleep became heavy and dreamless, when I began forgetting simple things. Anthony straightened and met my eyes. Mrs. Jean, the dosage is increasing over time. If nothing changes, this system could kill you within a few months. I gripped the cold cement wall, struggling to breathe. My own children, the 2 people I had carried, fed, and loved, were killing me slowly. Why? I whispered, though the word barely escaped my lips. He shook his head. Only they can answer that. But you need to leave right now. Don't say anything to them. Just take your essentials and go. We climbed the stairs in silence. My body moved on instinct, but my mind was blank. Like a television turned to static, every creak of the floorboard made my heart leap. In the kitchen, I finally spoke. Money, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. It has to be about money. Anthony looked at me with a question in his eyes. When my husband died, I explained. He left me his life insurance, some savings, and this house. Altogether, it's worth around $400,000. Anthony nodded slowly. That's enough to make people desperate. Desperate, the word hung in the air like poison. Suddenly I realized how little I actually knew about my children's lives. Michael always said he was working extra hours. Julia rarely came downstairs. I couldn't remember the last real conversation we'd had, just small exchanges about groceries or bills. Anthony's tone grew sharper. Mrs. Jean, there's no time. You need to leave before they get back, as if on cue. Footsteps sounded from upstairs. Mom Julia's voice called, "Who are you talking to?" Panic shot through me. I turned to Anthony, whose eyes widened. "The plumber, honey," I replied, forcing my voice steady. "He's just finishing up." Anthony leaned in so close. I could feel the tremor in his breath. His voice dropped to a low, urgent whisper. "Go to your room, grab your documents, and some essentials quickly." His tone left no room for hesitation. My heart hammered in my chest. I reached out and touched one of the tubes. It felt faintly warm. "It's running right now." Anthony nodded grimly. "Yes, ma'am. Whoever set this up knew exactly what they were doing." My breath caught. "You're saying someone installed this to poison me?" "I'm afraid so," he said softly, "and whoever did it had full access to your home. This wasn't done by a stranger." It felt as though the ground beneath me shifted. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "My children," I whispered. Anthony's jaw tightened. "This system required specific technical knowledge and time to install, you said. Your son works in construction." I stared at the device, my mind spinning. 2 years ago, Michael had insisted on renovating the bathroom himself. Julia had moved in soon after, claiming she wanted to take care of me. That was around the time the fatigue began. The timing wasn't a coincidence. "How long has this been operating?" I asked faintly. He crouched and examined the canisters. "Judging by the corrosion on these parts, at least 8 months. 8 months. That was when I'd started feeling dizzy after dinner, when sleep became heavy and dreamless, when I began forgetting simple things." Anthony straightened and met my eyes. "Mrs. Jean, the dosage is increasing over time. If nothing changes, this system could kill you within a few months." I gripped the cold cement wall, struggling to breathe. My own children, the 2 people I had carried, fed, and loved, were killing me slowly. "Why?" I whispered, though the word barely escaped my lips. He shook his head. "Only they can answer that, but you need to leave right now. Don't say anything to them. Just take your essentials and go." We climbed the stairs in silence. My body moved on instinct, but my mind was blank. Like a television turned to static, every creak of the floorboard made my heart leap. In the kitchen, I finally spoke. "Money," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "It has to be about money." Anthony looked at me with a question in his eyes. "When my husband died," I explained, "he left me his life insurance, some savings, and this house. Altogether, it's worth around $400,000. Anthony nodded slowly. "That's enough to make people desperate." Desperate, the word hung in the air like poison. Suddenly I realized how little I actually knew about my children's lives. Michael always said he was working extra hours. Julia rarely came downstairs. I couldn't remember the last real conversation we'd had, just small exchanges about groceries or bills. Anthony's tone grew sharper. "Mrs. Jean, there's no time. You need to leave before they get back," as if on cue. Footsteps sounded from upstairs. Mom Julia's voice called, "Who are you talking to?" Panic shot through me. I turned to Anthony, whose eyes widened. "The plumber, honey," I replied, forcing my voice steady. "He's just finishing up." Anthony leaned in so close I could feel the tremor in his breath. His voice dropped to a low, urgent whisper. "Go to your room, grab your documents, and some essentials quickly." His tone left no room for hesitation. My heart hammered in my chest, as if trying to escape, each beat growing louder. As I turned toward the stairs, my legs felt weak, but adrenaline pushed me upward. The old wooden steps creaked beneath my feet, and for a terrifying second I thought Julia might hear, but the sound of running water came from behind her door, the shower. She was still upstairs, completely unaware of what I now knew. I moved quietly, trying not to breathe too loudly. My bedroom door clicked shut behind me, muffling the noise from downstairs. My hands shook as I unlocked the safe. Hidden behind a row of family photos inside were the most important pieces of my life: my ID, my bank cards, property deeds, and a few personal documents I'd kept since my husband's death. I shoved them into my purse, my mind racing with disbelief. Could it really be true? Could my own children be trying to kill me? As I packed a few clothes into a small travel bag, my gaze fell on a framed photograph on my dresser. It was from Christmas 3 years ago, me, Michael and Julia all smiling by the tree. I remembered the warmth of that day, the sound of laughter, the scent of pine. It had been such a perfect moment or so. I thought. My throat tightened as I realized that by then they had already started poisoning me. That photo wasn't a memory anymore, it was evidence of betrayal. Still, I slipped it into my bag, not as a keepsake, but as a cruel reminder of how blind love can make you. Downstairs I heard faint voices, Julia's light melodic tone and Anthony's deeper one. I steadied my breathing and made my way down the staircase, clutching my bag tightly. Julia was standing in the kitchen, her wet hair clinging to her shoulders. Wrapped in a fluffy robe, she looked relaxed, even cheerful, pouring herself a cup of coffee. So it was just a rusty pipe, she asked Anthony casually. Exactly, Anthony replied smoothly, his voice calm, his expression unreadable. Julia turned, her eyes falling on the bag slung over my shoulder. Going somewhere, Mom? Her question froze me. My fingers tightened around the strap. Just to the bank, I said quickly, forcing a small smile. Want me to come with you? She offered sweetly. But there was something behind her tone, too smooth to measured. It sent a chill down my spine. No need, dear, I said, keeping my voice steady. Just some boring paperwork. Anthony stood then, wiping his hands on a rag. I'm done here, ma'am. That'll be $600. I reached for my wallet, trying to ignore the way Julia's eyes lingered on me when I handed Anthony the money. Our hands brushed briefly. His look said everything he couldn't say aloud. Leave now. Julia leaned against the counter, studying me carefully. You all right, Mom? You look pale. I'm fine, I replied with a forced laugh, just a little tired. You've been tired lately, she said, feigning concern. Maybe you should see a doctor. Her hypocrisy almost made me choke. I could still taste the metallic edge of fear in my mouth. Maybe I will, I said, walking toward the door. Love you, Mom, she said softly, flashing the same gentle smile that once melted my heart. Love you too, I answered automatically, though the words felt hollow, like repeating a line from a play that had long lost its meaning. When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit my face, and for the first time my home of 40 years looked like a stranger's house. The garden I'd tended with care, the porch where I'd rocked my grandchildren, even the windows that once glowed warmly at night. All of it now felt sinister. Anthony's old pickup truck was parked by the curb. He opened the passenger door. Get in, he said. We need to leave before she suspects anything. As the truck rolled away from the house, I turned back and stared through the rear view mirror. The place where I had raised my children, cooked their meals, patched their scraped knees. That place was now a death trap built by the very people I had given everything to. Where are we going? I asked, my voice trembling as I clutched my bag like it was a lifeline. Somewhere safe, Anthony said. We'll figure out the next steps there. There's a small cafe a few miles from here. The hum of the tires on the asphalt filled the silence. My thoughts swirled wildly. Unable to settle. We can talk there and call the police, Anthony added. After a moment, the word police hit me hard. Then, another word followed in my mind. Murder. He must have seen the horror on my face. Yes, ma'am, he said gently. What we found qualifies as attempted homicide. This isn't something we can handle alone. Murder, the word echoed in my head, sharp and metallic. My children weren't just ungrateful or selfish, they were potential killers. Killers who shared my dinner table, who smiled and kissed my cheek, who pretended to care while slowly planning my death. I can't believe this is really happening, I whispered, my eyes fixed on the familiar streets of my neighborhood. That now felt foreign, almost menacing. I know it's hard to process, Anthony said quietly, but you did the right thing. Leaving that house, what if we're wrong? I asked weakly, still clinging to hope, however impossible it seemed. Anthony shook his head, keeping his gaze on the road. Ma'am, I installed ventilation systems for 15 years before becoming a plumber. What I saw in your basement wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It was a device built specifically to disperse toxic chemicals into your bedroom air. There's no innocent explanation for that. His words left no room for doubt. I turned to look out the window, watching the city blur by. Deep down, I knew he was right, but my heart still refused to believe that my children, the babies I once rocked to sleep, could be capable of something so monstrous. How much time do you think I had left? I asked softly. Based on the timers and concentration levels, Anthony replied, maybe 2 or 3 months at most. Your symptoms would have worsened until they mimicked a natural illness. Respiratory failure, organ collapse. You would have died slowly, and no one would have suspected a thing. Tears welled in my eyes. How could they plan something like this? I whispered. How could they look me in the eye every day, saying they loved me while killing me? Anthony's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't have an answer for that, ma'am, but people who can do something like this, they won't just stop. They find out, you know, they might accelerate their plan or try something even more direct. A deep chill settled over me. You think they'll come after me? He exhaled slowly. Depends on how desperate they are for money. We drove in silence for a few minutes before the truck turned off the main road and into downtown San Antonio. The streets here were unfamiliar, lined with old brick buildings and small shops. Anthony parked in front of a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Inside, the smell of roasted coffee and cinnamon surrounded us, oddly comforting after the chaos of the past few hours. Anthony led me to a small table in the corner, far from the windows and clothes. To the exit, his caution said more than words ever could. He was planning for every possible outcome. A young waitress approached with a bright smile. What can I get for you folks? 2 coffees, please, Anthony said, and something sweet for the lady. She's had a rough day. Her kindness nearly broke me. I nodded, faintly grateful for the distraction. As we waited, my phone buzzed and my bag. A message from Julia. Mom, are you okay? You've been gone a while. I handed the phone to Anthony, my fingers trembling. Reply as usual, he said calmly. Tell her you're at the bank. The line is long. Keep everything sounding normal. I typed the message slowly, trying to steady my breathing. Seconds later, another text popped up. Want me and Michael to pick you up. He'll be home soon. They're monitoring you, Anthony said, worry flashing across his face. We need to move fast. The waitress returned with 2 steaming cups of coffee and a slice of chocolate cake. I hadn't ordered anything, but I was grateful for the sugar. I took a small bite, the sweetness grounding me, if only for a moment. What do we do now? I asked quietly. First, we need solid proof, Anthony replied. I'll go back to your house this afternoon. Say I need to double check something. I'll photograph the device and, if possible, collect chemical samples. Once we have evidence, we'll go to the police. They won't be able to deny it. I nodded, but another fear crept in me. Where should I stay? I don't want to endanger anyone I know. I thought of my younger sister in another state, of old friends scattered across Texas. Bringing anyone into this felt wrong. Maybe a hotel, I said finally, somewhere far from my neighborhood. Anthony agreed. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a business card, and scribbled a number on the back. This is my personal line. Call me anytime if your children text you. Show up, or if anything feels off. I held the card tightly as if it were the only solid thing left in my world. Anthony, why are you helping me? I asked. Softly, you don't even know me. He looked out the window, his expression distant. I lost my mother 5 years ago. He said she died of cancer, or that's what we thought months before her diagnosis. She started having strange symptoms, fatigue, shortness of breath, weakness. No doctor could explain it. After she passed, I found out my brother had been tampering with her medication and stealing her savings. Oh my God, I whispered, the words barely audible. I couldn't save her, he continued. By the time I discovered what he'd done, it was too late. When I saw what was happening to you, I realized I had a second chance to do what's right. His story broke something open inside me. A stranger had risked his safety to protect me when my own children had turned against me. Was your brother arrested? I asked. Yes, Anthony said, but only for theft. By the time we found out about the medication, there wasn't enough proof to charge him for her death. That's why you want evidence, I murmured. Exactly. I don't want your children to walk away free. Just then, my phone buzzed again. Michael? This time Mom, Julia said, you've been out for hours. Everything okay? Where are you? I replied quickly. At the bank. Might stop by a few stores before coming home. The response came immediately. Which bank? I can come get you. Anthony leaned over to glance at my screen. They're getting anxious, he said. Keep your messages vague but reassuring. Tell them you're fine and we'll be home soon. I did as he said, but the texts kept coming, short, urgent, relentless. Then the phone began to ring. Answer it, Anthony said firmly, but be careful. I swallowed hard and pressed. Accept. Hi honey, I said, forcing lightness into my voice. Where are you, Mom? Michael's voice was calm but strained, like he was trying too hard to sound normal. Julia said you took your bag. Are you staying somewhere tonight? No, sweetheart, I replied, my voice wavering slightly. I just brought some papers to handle at the bank. What papers? Which bank? He pressed, his tone sharpening with every question. Why all the questions, Michael? I said, trying to keep my tone steady. I'm an adult. There was a long pause. On the other end, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. Then Michael's voice came through again, softer this time, rehearsed, almost as if he had prepared every word. Sorry, Mom, he said, you've just been acting strange lately. Julia and I are worried about your health. The irony of his concern, the audacity of it, made my stomach twist in knots. The very symptoms that had been draining me day by day, the fatigue, the headaches, the breathlessness, were all the result of what he and his sister had done. And now the same voice that once called me Mommy in the middle of the night was pretending to worry about the damage he'd caused. I'm perfectly fine, I said, firmly, forcing calm into my voice, though my pulse was racing. You should see a doctor, Mom, he continued, that false note of care barely masking something more strategic beneath it. At your age, regular checkups are important. That was when I understood exactly what he was doing. They didn't just want me dead, they wanted proof that my body had been failing for months. He wanted medical records, evidence to make it all look natural, a death without suspicion, certified by doctors as nothing more than old age catching up. I'll think about it, I replied quickly, desperate to end the call. See you later, love you, Mom, he said. Those words had wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. Now they were knives disguised as affection. Love you too, I answered, automatically realizing, as I hung up, that it was the second time that day I had lied about it. When I lowered the phone, my hands were trembling so hard I could barely keep hold of it. The screen blurred through, the tears gathering in my eyes. Anthony, sitting across from me, reached out and placed his weathered hands gently over mine. His touch was steady, grounding. You're not alone in this, he said softly. We'll figure it out, I promise. The simple sincerity and his voice almost undid me. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat too tight with emotion. After a few minutes he asked for the check-in. We left the small cafe. The sun outside was dipping low, casting golden light over the downtown San Antonio streets. I followed Anthony in silence, still clutching my purse like a lifeline. My legs felt heavy, my body moving through fog. We reached a modest hotel on a quiet corner, a place with beige walls and potted plants by the entrance. Inside, Anthony spoke to the receptionist, his voice calm but firm. He booked a room under his own name, paying in cash. No one can trace you here, he whispered as he handed me the key. Room 215. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone but me. If you need something, call room service. Understand? I nodded, holding the small brass key tightly. When will you go back to my house? I asked. In about 2 hours, he said. I'll tell them another client reported the same problem and that I just need to double check your place. That way it won't raise suspicion. Before leaving, he hesitated by the doorway, his hand resting on the frame. Ma'am, he said quietly, I need to ask you something important. Do you have a will? I blinked, caught off guard. Yes, I do. Why are your children your only heirs? Yes, I said. Michael and Julia share everything equally. Anthony nodded, his jaw tightening. Then it's clear if you die, they inherit everything. A sudden memory hit me. But the will states that if my death is ruled a crime, they lose their inheritance. He looked at me intently. Do they know that I think so? I said slowly. We discussed it after my husband passed away. Anthony let out a grim sigh. Then it all makes sense. If you die of what looks like natural causes, no one will ever question it. They made sure of that. The cold precision of their plan made me shudder. My children hadn't just betrayed me, they had engineered a perfect crime, one that would leave them rich and me buried under a lie. Anthony, I whispered, my voice trembling. What kind of people could do something like this? He shook his head. People who've lost their humanity, he said softly. When money becomes the only thing that matters, family means nothing. His words stung because they were true. I looked down at my hands, these same hands that had once held theirs when they were little, the same hands that had packed their lunches, written tuition checks, wiped away tears. I raised them to be good people, I said quietly. I gave them love and education, values. Anthony's voice softened. Sometimes people change. Pressure, greed, bad choices, they can twist anyone, turn them into someone you don't recognize. He stayed with me a while longer, making sure I was settled safely in the hotel room before heading out. When the door closed behind him, the silence was deafening. For years, I had lived surrounded by noise. The hum of the television, the creak of footsteps upstairs, doors opening and closing, the clatter of dishes in the sink. Now in this unfamiliar room, the stillness pressed against my chest until I could hardly breathe. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the muted glow of the city. Through the window, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I hesitated before picking it up. 5 new messages, 3 from Julia, 2 from Michael, each one more frantic than the last. Mom, it's 4 o'clock. P.M. Where are you? Michael's worried, sick. Please answer if you don't respond. We're coming to find you. Each message sent a cold shiver through my spine. Were they really worried, or were they realizing their plan had failed? I typed back, quickly choosing my words carefully. I'm fine. The bank is crowded. I stopped to buy a few things and we'll be home soon. Michael's reply came almost instantly, as if he had been waiting by the phone. As I stared at the screen, memories began to flood back. The overdue bills I had found in the kitchen drawer, the late-night phone calls Michael tried to hide, Julia's constant tension, and then piece by piece, the truth fit together like a cruel puzzle. Michael had been drowning in gambling debt, more than $1 to $0,000. I remembered the days he would come home restless, snapping at everyone, avoiding eye contact. He'd borrowed from loan sharks and had been threatened, not just financially but physically. Julia, on the other hand, had fallen apart after her divorce. Her ex-husband had caught her cheating, proved it in court, and left her with nothing. She'd returned home, broke and bitter, too proud to admit defeat, but too desperate to rebuild her life. Together they had seen in me not a mother but a solution. My death would unlock everything they needed: $400,000 from insurance, savings, and the house I had worked my entire life to pay for. But they knew that if my death seemed suspicious, the will would be invalidated. So they designed a perfect, natural exit, one that would leave no questions, no investigations, no loose ends. The idea of slow poisoning had been Julia's. With her chemistry background, she had calculated every dose, every compound, every release pattern. Michael had installed the device himself under the guise of a bathroom renovation. Together, they turned my own home into a weapon. The rest of that night passed in fragments. I didn't remember falling asleep, but at some point dawn came, pale and quiet within days. The police had all the evidence they needed. Anthony returned with photos, samples, and detailed reports. There were traces of toxins in the pipes, chemical residues in my air vents. It was undeniable. Then came the arrests, and with them the trial, a 3-week blur of grief and disbelief. Every morning, I sat in the courtroom and listened to the prosecutors describe in clinical detail how my own children had planned to kill me. Each word felt like a blade cutting deeper into my heart. Michael sat stiff and expressionless, staring straight ahead as if the whole thing were just another job he had to get through. Julia wept dramatically whenever the jury looked her way, but turned cold and calculating when she thought no one was watching. Anthony testified with quiet strength, explaining what he had discovered in the basement and recounting the conversations he'd overheard between my children. His testimony became the turning point of the trial. Through those long gray days, Anthony became more than a witness. He became my anchor. Every morning before court, he would find me in the hallway, hand me a cup of coffee, and ask, "How are you feeling today?" Like someone who's lost everything. I would often reply, "Not everything." He'd remind me softly, "You still have your life, your health, your dignity. They couldn't take that from you." After 3 weeks, the verdict came: guilty, premeditated attempted murder. Michael was sentenced to 20 years in prison with no chance of parole. For the first 15, Julia received 18 years with eligibility for parole after 12. When the judge read the sentences aloud, I felt relief and heartbreak intertwined so tightly I could hardly breathe. Justice had been served, but at a cost no mother should ever have to pay. Even then, part of me still ached for them. The maternal instinct never truly dies, it just learns to live beside the pain. After the trial, I sold the house I had lived in for 40 years in Dallas, the house that had once held laughter, then secrets, and finally danger. With the money, I bought a small apartment by the California coast where no one knew my name. There the ocean breeze carried away the echoes of the past, and I began slowly to live again. Anthony remained in my life. At first, he was simply a friend, someone who checked in, made sure I was safe. But over time, something deeper took root between us. It wasn't romance in the usual sense, but a quiet companionship built on mutual respect, shared pain, and the understanding that sometimes the people who save us come from the most unexpected places. One afternoon, as we walked along the beach, Anthony said, "Some people go through their whole lives without ever seeing the true faces of the ones they love. You saw it and you survived. That takes extraordinary courage." I gave him a faint smile. I didn't think of myself as brave on my darkest nights. I still wondered where I had failed as a mother, what signs I had missed, or if my children had ever truly loved me, or if I had only ever been a source of money for them to exploit. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Julia in prison. I left the envelope on the table. 4 days, unable to find the strength to open it. When I finally did, I found pages filled with apologies, explanations about her desperation, and words of late remorse. I've realized what a monster I became. I don't expect forgiveness, I just want you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm deeply sorry, she wrote. I replied briefly, wishing her peace but making it clear that if forgiveness ever came, it would take a very long time. Michael never wrote. A part of me died the moment I saw that device in the basement. The mother who once believed she knew her children completely, who thought maternal love was unbreakable. That woman was gone, replaced by another Jean, more cautious, more aware, a woman who had learned in the hardest way that the cruelest betrayals often come from those we trust most. I learned that blood does not guarantee love or loyalty, that true family is defined by actions, not by DNA. Now at 70 years old, I found a fragile kind of peace. My health has fully recovered. I take morning walks along the beach, join a local book club, and grow flowers on the small balcony of my apartment. Anthony and I have dinner together twice a week, sharing stories and genuine laughter. Sometimes when I look at the ocean, I think about how life can change. In a single day, a small leak that seemed insignificant exposed a murder plot. A stranger became my savior, while the people who were supposed to love me most turned into my enemies. The pain never completely disappears on birthdays, Thanksgiving, or Christmas. I still feel the emptiness left by my children, not who they are now, but who I once believed they were. Yet I've learned to live with that pain, to let it become part of my story, not the whole of it. The plumber who came to fix a leak ended up saving far more than a leaking ceiling. He saved my life, and he taught me that sometimes salvation comes from where we least expect it, while danger hides behind the faces we trust. If there's one lesson I've taken from this tragedy, it's this: judge people by their actions, not their blood. True family are those who protect us when we're vulnerable, not the ones who exploit that vulnerability. Real love reveals itself through daily acts of kindness and respect, not through words or obligation. And above all, trust your instincts. That quiet voice inside that whispers when something feels wrong is usually right, even if you can't yet explain why. If I had listened sooner, noticed the strange questions, the subtle changes, the evasive glances, I might not have come so close to dying. When people ask about my children, I simply say we're estranged. It's easier than telling the whole truth, easier than watching pity appear in their eyes. To the world, I'm just an old woman living alone by the sea. No one needs to know that I survived one of the cruelest betrayals imaginable. The leak in my old house revealed more than a technical flaw. It revealed the true nature of the people I once thought I knew best. It exposed how fragile family ties become when tested by greed and desperation. And it proved that sometimes strangers show more humanity than our own blood. Even now, I sometimes wake in the middle of the night convinced I hear footsteps in the hallway, or that I'm breathing that poisoned air again. Trauma leaves marks that time can fade but never erase. Other women who've survived domestic betrayal tell me that this constant vigilance is natural part of healing. That maybe one day I'll sleep without checking the locks twice, without analyzing every gesture around me for hidden deceit. Anthony understands that better than anyone. He lost his mother to his own brother and carries the same guilt, the guilt of not recognizing the signs in time. Perhaps that's why our bond runs so deep. We both know The unique pain of being betrayed by those who should have protected us once, he asked. Me, do you know what helped me keep going, realizing that no matter how dark the world can be, there are still good people in it. For every act of betrayal, there's someone capable of extraordinary kindness. I hold on to that truth because on the very day I discovered my children wanted me dead, I also discovered that a stranger was willing to risk his life to save mine. That's life, light and shadow always intertwined. The same world that shelters monsters also shelters heroes. The same life that brings unbearable pain can also offer unexpected beauty. When I sit on my balcony, watching the sunset over the California coast, I feel grateful for my second chance to breathe without fear, to know the truth before it was too late, to find a strength I never knew I had. I don't know what the future holds for my children, whether they'll ever truly feel remorse or whether I'll ever be able to forgive them completely. But I do know this: despite everything I've lost, I gained something priceless. The truth, painful as it is, that truth saved my life and gave me the chance to rebuild it on something real. Perhaps that's the final lesson, that sometimes we must lose everything to discover who we truly are, that in the ashes of devastation we can still find the seeds of a new beginning, that even after the deepest betrayal, there's still a path back to the light. I am no longer just Jean, the mother of Michael and Julia. I am Jean, the woman who faced the unimaginable and survived, the woman who learned that family isn't defined by blood but by love and action, the woman who, thanks to a leaking pipe and a compassionate plumber, was given the chance to grow old with dignity and peace, the very things my own children once tried to take from me. And because of that, even on the days when the pain feels unbearable, I remain deeply grateful. What about you? What do you think truly makes a family? Blood or love and understanding? Share your thoughts below, because I believe everyone has their own story and lesson to tell. And if you'd like to join me as I continue exploring the hidden corners of family and the quiet truths of life, stay with me for the next story. Who knows, maybe through these stories we'll each find a piece of ourselves.